Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sabrina with the blog Held Fast Home, where I share housecraft, food from scratch recipes, and our journey to slow living on less than a quarter acre. Just over a month ago, we planted out our spring frost-tolerant garden that included a variety of lettuces, kale, cabbage, and bok choy. We also succession sowed radishes, beets, and carrots. This bed is truly flourishing. We've harvested many times from it already, and I love not having to buy this produce from the store. Today I'm going to be making meals not entirely from the spring garden, but some of this produce will be incorporated into each of our meals today. Beginning with breakfast. I'm starting with stovetop oatmeal for the kiddos, but we are leveling it up today because instead of water, we are using milk and also adding a dash of vanilla extract. This creates a rich, creamy oatmeal base for our berries and cream oats. While the oats are slowly cooking on the stovetop so as not to scald the milk, I'm preparing the strawberries for our berry topping. First, I'll core the berries with this nifty gadget I purchased from Aldi years ago, and then I'll thinly slice the berries. Now, we won't use all of these strawberries for this breakfast. Some of them I will set aside for our dessert treat that we'll make together later in this video. For the remaining strawberries, it will be much more convenient to have them all ready to use for snacks and toppings. Since we've prepped the strawberries for our sweet treat, I'm also using this opportunity to finely slice some rhubarb that we'll also use for the dessert. Now, this rhubarb isn't from our personal garden. I just planted some little baby plants this year, but this is from a friend's garden. When the oatmeal starts to bubble and thicken, I remove it from heat and cover it with a lid until I'm ready to portion it into bowls. And then we are going to the more savory portion of today's breakfast, which is inspired by a new favorite channel and blog of mine called Healthy Elizabeth. In one of her recent videos, she made a spinach and feta omelet that spurred me on this idea of a cheddar kale omelet, which my husband and I will be splitting this morning. Before we prepare the kale, I'm starting some onions to saute on the stove. Taking the kale from our garden, I'm then washing and de-stemming it. To de-stem kale leaves, I use one hand to grab the base of the stem and the other hand to grasp the leaves. Then pull your hands away from each other, that is in opposite directions, while maintaining your grips, and the leaves will separate from the toughest part of the stem. Then roughly chop the kale, layering leaves atop each other, slicing once or twice down their lengths, and then slicing through their widths in 1/2 to 1 inch sections. This kale will shrink down significantly in the skillet. I like the flavor of my onions best when they begin to toast and get slightly browned around the edges, so I won't add in my kale until then. To make the day of cooking a little more efficient, you can chop all of these fruits and vegetables the night before or at the beginning of the week. Today just happened to be the day I did a little more of that chopping work to make the rest of the week easier. We're using 5 eggs in this omelet today, and my kiddos are learning to crack eggs by themselves, and I just love seeing their little hands helping out in the kitchen, even when they crack an egg onto the counter instead of into the bowl. Add the kale to the onions and cook them down together. To make the omelet easy to flip, I added about 2 tablespoons of butter to my cast iron. Then all I'm adding to the eggs is salt and pepper. By the way, I just learned that you should mix up your omelet eggs with a fork instead of a whisk because you're not trying to incorporate air into the omelet, unlike scrambled eggs. At this time, I portioned out my children's berries and cream oatmeal, and my oldest requested bananas on top of hers as well. Flipping an omelet may be controversial. My husband thinks omelets shouldn't be flipped, but I cannot eat a wet omelet unless I know it's gooey solely from the cheese. Let me know if you flip omelets or not. I flip mine when I can see the bottom is solid and could withstand a flip. Once your omelet is flipped, pile on the toppings, folding the omelet in a tri-fold to encase the toppings. Then serve. This omelet is so hefty, I had to use 2 spatulas to remove it from the pan in one piece. Then I split the omelet into 1/3 and 2/3, with me taking the smaller portion and what was left in the pot of oatmeal. Such a decent meal. This day was my husband's day off, so we took an impromptu trip to a nearby town to thrift shop and snag some homemade donuts. It also turned out to be Ag Day for the high school in that town, so we got to see a bunch of livestock animals and commercial farming equipment up close while we snacked on our delicious donuts. Here's a little haul of what I purchased at the thrift store. As our family continues to grow, of course, I'm interested in everything pertaining to childbirth. I also snagged these 2 wide-mouth mason jars that are in perfect canning condition. And I'm really excited about these two glass amber vessels. The lids don't have the best seal for food or pantry items, but I think they would make lovely candles with a vintage apothecary feel. I started on lunch right when we returned home, and I am throwing together a pasta salad with our homegrown red and green leaf lettuce. The noodles we are using today are gluten-free, even though no one in our house is gluten-free. We're just finishing up a bag from when my parents visited. The flavor and texture of these noodles are good, but I found only on the day you prepare them. The texture significantly degraded for us overnight, so if you're planning for leftovers, I would boil them as you need them. Next, I'm prepping our lettuce by washing, thinly slicing, and then drying it in our salad spinner. Here's how I store extra lettuce. After washing the lettuce, place a paper towel on the bottom of a storage container. Stack your extra lettuce and kale, then close and refrigerate. This keeps the veggies super crunchy and fresh. Then I thinly chopped some cucumbers, sadly not from our spring garden, but hopefully they'll flourish in our summer garden. Since I was already chopping a few cucumbers into quarters for this salad, I cut up the entire bag into snacking sticks to make it easier on us throughout the week. To add more protein to this lunch, I'm adding this Italian chicken sausage from Aldi. This was our first time using it, and I don't think we'll be using it again because my children thought it was too spicy. And even though I was seriously impressed with the ingredients, I wasn't really impressed with the flavor. I usually use brats at this step or even a kielbasa sausage. To get these sausages some crispy edges, I sliced each in half and browned them on the skillet. Moving on to the dressing of our salad, this is all I have left of my delicious dried tomato, garlic, and oregano infused olive oil. We made this together in the tomato preservation video in the corner, and I cannot wait to make another batch of it this summer. It is truly phenomenal. After drizzling on the oil, I'm adding some freshly cracked pepper and a sprinkle of pink salt. Now we're working on portioning the kiddos' lunches, starting with a handful of noodles in each bowl and adding the rest to our veggie mixture. Then I'm cutting up these sausages with some scissors and dividing them between all of the bowls. And then I'm topping with some mozzarella cheese, but Parmesan works great here too. Finally, I'm adding an entire diced avocado to the pasta salad as the finishing touch. This is such a delicious, light, and crisp lunch. It is now that time in the afternoon when my youngest naps and my husband took the older ones to the playground today, so I'm getting started on our dessert for this evening. It is another healthy Elizabeth recipe that I knew I just had to make right when I saw it. It's her strawberry rhubarb almond cake, and spoiler alert, it was fantastic. To make this process go smoothly, I'm gathering all of our necessary ingredients before I mix a single thing. A variation that I'm taking with this recipe is that instead of using all-purpose flour, I will, of course, be grinding soft white wheat berries. I also didn't have any almond extract on hand, so I just relied on the vanilla measurement included in the recipe. Optimistically, you could call this a variation, but I'd probably classify it as a mess up. I melted my butter completely on the stove instead of softening it on the counter. The only butter I had was in the freezer, and I just didn't have the time to wait for it to soften. And even though the butter and sugar didn't really cream together since the butter was completely melted, the cake still turned out delicious. While the butter and sugar mix together, I'm milling 1 1/4 cup of soft white wheat berries. The recipe calls for 1 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour. What has worked best for me when working with freshly milled berries and converting recipes to freshly milled flour is knowing how to identify the different textures of batters and dough by sight and touch. Knowing what cake and muffin batters look like, or a smooth dough ball, or even biscuit dough, makes it easy for me to know what the end product should look like, even when I'm substituting freshly milled grains. If you'd like more details about how I convert all-purpose recipes to freshly milled grains, let me know. As my grains are milling, I'm adding the other dry ingredients to the bowl and continuing to add wet ingredients to the stand mixer. I love that this recipe uses yogurt, and this jar of yogurt is one I showed you how to make in this video in the corner. Then I'm incorporating the dry ingredients into the wet ones and preparing the cake pan. I do really wish I had a glass one of these. Alas, I just haven't found one yet. First, we are adding half the batter to the bottom of the cake pan, then half the amount of strawberries and rhubarb, then the rest of the batter, and topping that with the rest of the strawberries and rhubarb, sliced almonds, and half a tablespoon of sugar. Dividing the batter like this isn't my strong suit, but everything came out beautifully. I love how bright the fruit in this cake is. It just sings spring. I think next time that I would cut maybe half a cup more of the fruit for the layers and topping. Even so, it is still an incredible cake. Continuing with dinner, I am making chicken lo mein, a recipe inspired by the YouTube channel Pick Up Limes. I'll start by slicing up a variety of veggies, beginning with mushrooms. Then I'll take my garden bok choy, cutting the stems from the leaves, and I'll roughly chop both. The stems will go into the pan with the onions to saute since they take a little longer to soften. Then I will thinly slice these snacking bell peppers. Again, I'm not using all of these in today's recipe, but I am preparing them for an easy grab-and-go snack during the week since I already have the knife and cutting board out. Once our veggies are all prepped, I'm readying a pot of water to boil on the stove for our noodles. Then add the onion and bok choy stems to soften in a skillet with avocado and sesame oil. Once the water is boiling, add in the noodles of your preference. You could also use rice here. While your onions and stems continue to soften, I'm mixing up the sauce. 1 teaspoon each of sriracha and rice vinegar, 3 tablespoons each of coconut aminos and water. I added a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, and then 2 teaspoons each of sesame oil and cornstarch. Then to our skillet, I'm adding the mushrooms, some salt to sweat out those veggies. Then mixing in the peppers, bok choy leaves, and leftover shredded chicken. I'm topping with a teaspoon of ground ginger and adding the sauce. Then I'm mixing in the noodles and reserving some for any kiddos who would like them plain. Once I added the noodles, I wanted the sauce to stretch a little further, so I added 2 tablespoons of reserved chicken drippings from last night's roast chicken, which is also where we got our shredded chicken from. You could also use 2 tablespoons of pasta water here instead. I just forgot to reserve any after straining off the noodles. And there you have a delicious noodle dish for dinner. This also served both my husband and I for lunch the next day. Before I ended this video, I thought I'd show you how I cleaned up that cast iron pan from dinner. It's really just how you would rinse and gently scrub out a regular pot or pan, just without soap. A family friend makes these tool scrunchies and they work well for us. Once everything is cleaned off, wipe the pan as dry as you can with a towel, then transfer the cast iron to your stove top. Turn the burner on medium-low to fully evaporate any moisture left on the pan. Then drizzle a penny to nickel-size amount of avocado oil into the pan and use a cloth or paper towel to distribute it evenly over the surface and sides of the pan. I'll turn off the heat after this point, but keep the pan on the burner as it cools. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.